Welcome back, everybody. Hope you are ready to learn a little bit more about the diversity of life. We stopped with the last lecture talking about plants and plant evolution, so the major innovations that took place as plants evolved. And now we're going to get into some interactions that plants have with animals, so how they have co-evolved or evolved together. So let's open that up. I've got my coffee. I hope you've got yours, and a pen, and we will get started. It's making me start at the beginning. I will pull this through quickly now. Okay, so the kinds of interactions that plants and animals have are, there are multiple ones. Plants and animals help one another, and these would be symbiotic relationships where they're both benefiting, also known as, well, and symbiotic just means they're living together. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's good, but when it's a good relationship, it's mutualistic. So they're mutually helping one another, not out of the goodness of their heart, but they're both getting something from it. And so pollination and dispersal and seed dispersal I have in green here, those are the mutualistic relationships. But then there are also predatory relationships. And so those obviously are not mutualistic. Not everybody's happy except for, the predator in that relationship. So we'll start with the mutualistic aspects. So, as I said, plants and animals have co-evolved for both pollination and seed dispersal. And these are two different things. Pollination is fertilization, and seed dispersal is moving that baby, that embryo. So they're not the same thing. Most angiosperms, flowering plants, rely on animals for pollination rather than wind. So these are our pollinator insects, these are hummingbirds, these are bats, anything that you see at the flower. Pollination takes place at the flower. Right, this is fertilization. It's moving the pollen, which has sperm in it, to the ovule. So the let's say it's a hummingbird, it will go up to the flower to get some nectar, and it'll get pollen on its head, and then it goes to another flower and it puts that pollen onto that next flower to fertilize it. So that's pollination. The seed dispersal is after pollination. A seed forms, and those seeds are often encased in fruits, and plants depend on animals to take those fruits also. So plants are giving animals lots of sugar in the fruit. And so they're getting the animals something, but the animals in turn are either pollinating or seed dispersing for them. So plants entice pollinators in a few different ways. There can be trickery or bribery. Bribery is providing valuable things like nectar or a place to lay eggs. So this is mutualistic. Trickery, the plants aren't actually giving anything to the animals, but the animals think they're getting something out of it. So here's a picture of a type of orchid, and it looks like a bee. And so male bees may think there's a good looking bee. These are not for honeybees, but other solitary bees. And the bee would go up and land there thinking it's a beautiful female on all of these flowers, get some pollen on its head, and then it goes to the next flower. And we can see many ways in which plants and or flowers and their pollinators have co-evolved. So you can see based on the color of the flower what type of pollinator it is trying to attract, because they don't all try to attract everybody. They have specific animals that have co-evolved with those plants. So white flowers usually have nocturnal pollinators, because you can see white at night. When you walk out at your house, plants that open at night, flowers that may open, are usually white ones. Colorful ones you can't see at night, so those are for daytime pollinators. The structure of the flower often gives a clue to the pollinator as well. So flowers that are tubular often have pollinators that have a long beak or a long tongue to get into that flower. So here we can see a hummingbird with that tubular flower, and they have co-evolved. So other pollinators would have a very different, or other insects that are not the pollinator of that flower would have a very difficult time getting to that nectar source. And then the odors will attract pollinators. So the flowers that we may enjoy the smell of, very sweet, are going to attract animals that like sugary, sweet things as well. There are some flowers that are super stinky, and those have flies as their pollinators. So the flies come thinking it's like rotten meat, and they'll lay their eggs there. So this is for pollination. Now there's also this relationship with plants and animals for seed dispersal. So the seeds are, as I said, packaged in a fruit so that the animal will eat it and then carry that seed somewhere else so that it is not competing with its parents and all of its siblings, in the exact same area, but those seeds will sprout and grow somewhere else. Now, these are these mutualistic relationships. Obviously, a lot of plants are eaten as well, and they need to have some resistance to predators. So plants don't just sit there, even though um, they can't move. They are not defenseless. So plants have evolved specific defenses, and animals have co-evolved, right, in response to these plants' defenses to kind of get around them. So the ways that plants can defend themselves, they can have physical structures like spines and thorns, like a rose bush would have. They can have chemical compounds that make them bitter or that sting you, like nettle or poison ivy. Or they could have sticky stuff like resin. So this is, the whole idea of Jurassic Park, that a mosquito gets caught in that resin. And some plants kind of fill veins and a chemical compound in it. Now, every time a plant evolves a defense, the animals now have a selection pressure on them, right? So, as we learned, you can't evolve because you need to, but if there's an animal that can get around some of these plant defense mechanisms, that animal is going to be more successful, get more food, and pass on that defense mechanism or that circumvention to its offspring. So this kind of coevolution where they're kind of at war with each other and always trying to one up one another is called the Red Queen effect, because she says it takes all the running you can do to stay in the same place, right? The plant evolves, the animal evolves, the plant evolves, the animal evolves, right? So they continually are mounting a better defense or a better offense, but they never really get ahead. So as the plants are mounting all these defenses, we've got herbivore adaptations. So some animals have really special teeth or a hard palate so that it doesn't hurt if you're biting a thorn, because there's nothing soft there that it can go through. Some of them can have special digestive enzymes so that those bitter compounds don't taste bad. So, they'll eat their kale and it doesn't, nobody has to remind them to. One cool example is that insects have an enzyme necessary for digesting some plant compounds called protease. Plants, some plants have then evolved a protease inhibitor so that it doesn't work, and the insect can't digest their compounds. And then those insects have then developed a way to degrade the inhibitor, right? So they just keep each making one little step ahead of the other one. Some herbivores also will only eat certain parts of the leaves that have lower chemical compounds, or eat different leaves at different times of the year. So they are, adapting to and co-evolving with one another. Now, plants can respond to this, right? As I said, they are not just sitting there. They can communicate chemically with each other. So, plants can emit a chemical called methyl jasmonate, and other plants can sense that and ramp up their chemical production. So, it's kind of like, I don't actually know if the smell of cut grass is methyl jasmonate or a different compound, but you're smelling the plant screaming out like, "Save yourself! There's a whole herd of herbivores here." Some insects will actually be attracted to that smell of methyl jasmonate and come to feast on whatever else is already eating the plant. So those insects that are attracted to the methyl jasmonate have a mutualistic relationship with the plant, and they're both working against the animal that's eating the plant. And then, of course, some plants will turn the tables and actually eat the insects. So this carnivorous plants tend to occur in areas that have very nutrient poor soil, and so they get some of their nutrients from the animals that they eat. All right, so this is the end of this chapter, and we will move on to discussing animals next.